I was sitting on the front porch that morning, nursing a mug of hot tea I didn't really want, just holding it to feel something warm in my hands. The neighborhood was quiet, just birds and wind, and the kind of stillness that only comes when you're waiting for answers that won't text you back. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Tom, my neighbor across the street. Just one image, no words. I opened it, and there she was, my wife, walking up our driveway. 3 months after she left to go take care of her sick mother. 3 months of silence, unanswered calls, delayed replies, excuses from her sister about why she couldn't talk. And now, she was back, glowing, radiant, laughing, and unmistakably pregnant. At least 5 or 6 months, by the look of it. I stood there, staring at the screen. The air felt thick. She wasn't even trying to hide it. No apology, no explanation, no shame. Just a return, like she'd gone on a trip and forgot to bring back souvenirs. The photo wasn't just a picture. It was a verdict, a declaration. She didn't just betray me, she erased me from her plans, and came back with proof she had already started building a new life without me. That was the moment I realized she didn't just come back with a secret. She came back with proof she never intended to return to me. And right then, as I watched her walk toward the house we built together, pregnant with someone else's child, something inside me went quiet. Not broken, not furious, just still. That kind of still that comes before a storm. The kind you don't hear until it's already overhead. If this story grips you, subscribe for more real-life betrayals, revenge and justice told from a man's point of view. I didn't speak when she walked through the door. She acted like she didn't notice I was standing in the hallway. Set her purse down gently on the table, like it hadn't been gathering dust for months. "Hi," she said, breathless. "I didn't expect you to be home." No hug, no tears, no "I missed you." Just that. I looked at her stomach. She placed a hand over it instinctively, then caught herself, like she forgot she was supposed to pretend. She didn't even flinch. "What happened to your mother?" I asked, my voice flat. She blinked. "She's fine now. Thank God." It was touch and go for a while. Touch and go. That's what she called disappearing for 92 days. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't ask the obvious. Not yet. I just nodded, walked past her, and went upstairs, closed the door behind me, sat down at the edge of the bed we used to share. I didn't know if I was more shocked by what she did, or how easily she acted like nothing was wrong. But now that I look back, I realize the signs were there. Long before that photo, 3 months before she left, she'd started making excuses to avoid intimacy. She was always tired, always stressed. Our conversations had become transactional. "Pass me the salt. We're out of milk. You forgot to take the trash out again." Little things, easy to miss if you weren't looking. But then came the secrets. The silent phone calls in the bathroom. The late-night text messages where the screen would light up and she'd roll over to shield it with her hand. The passwords that suddenly changed on our shared tablet. I remember the moment I truly began to wonder. It wasn't a fight. It was a moment of quiet. I had brought home her favorite soup after work, chicken and mushroom, extra herbs, just like she liked it. She looked at it like it was a chore, said, "You're always doing the most. Just let me breathe." That's when it clicked. She wasn't tired. She was already emotionally gone. A week before she announced she was going to visit her sick mom, I caught a strange charge on our joint account. It wasn't big, just a $92 hotel bill in another city. She said it was a mistake, said it must have been fraud. I called the hotel behind her back, asked who checked in. They confirmed her full name, ID verified. I didn't say anything, I just filed it in the back of my mind. Because something deeper than anger had begun to take root inside me. Something colder, more calculated. I didn't want to expose her. I wanted to understand just how deep the betrayal ran. Before she left, she hugged me, for the first time in weeks, told me she loved me, said she'd call every day. She didn't. In fact, the first week she was gone. All I got were 2 text messages and 1 awkward video call where I couldn't see the background. Her mother never came to the screen. She looked nervous, kept shifting her eyes like someone was just off camera. "I'm just tired," she said. "It's been really overwhelming." Then she hung up. That was the last time I saw her face until the photo. I started keeping notes in a small black journal. Dates, times, transactions. She thought I was still clueless, still her gentle, trusting husband, but I had already begun preparing for war. I stopped direct deposits into the joint account. I checked the deed on the house. We had listed it in both our names for sentimental reasons. That was about to become my biggest regret. I began making copies of everything: texts, bank statements, the hotel call logs. I wasn't angry. I was documenting. Because when you're dealing with a liar, the most powerful thing you can do is wait. One night I found an email draft on the laptop she'd left behind. She'd forgotten to log out. It wasn't sent, but it was there, staring at me. A message to someone named Marcus. It read, "He's not going to suspect a thing. He's boring. Predictable. I'll just say my mom needed me longer. You focus on the baby. I'll handle him." I read it 3 times. Then I copied it, printed it, and put it in my journal. I didn't confront her. Not yet. She had built her story carefully, like a spider spinning a web. But I wasn't going to be the fly. Not this time. I wasn't going to yell or beg or plead. I was going to wait until she stepped into the web herself. Then I'd burn it all down, quietly, with proof, with grace. And with a calm she would mistake for weakness, right up until the moment it destroyed her. The next day, I called my son. I didn't want. God knows I didn't want to involve him, but something in me needed to be heard. Not believed, necessarily. Just witnessed. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Dad," he said, cheerful as ever. "Everything all right?" There was a long pause before I answered. "No," I said quietly. "I need to talk to you. Come by if you can." He showed up that afternoon, fresh from work, still in his button shirt and slacks. He had that half smile he always wore, like he was trying to keep the world light even when it wasn't. He sat across from me at the dining table, fingers drumming on the wood. I slid the envelope across to him. Inside were the bank receipts, the hotel confirmation, the email draft to Marcus. He pulled them out one by one, his brow furrowing as he read. When he got to the last line of the email, "I'll handle him," his mouth tightened. He put the papers down, looked at me. "Dad, are you sure you're not misreading this?" I stared at him. Misreading? Misreading what? I asked. He shifted in his seat, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was uncomfortable. "I mean, it's bad, yeah. But maybe there's a context we don't have. Maybe she was just venting. Mom's been under a lot of stress, and you haven't exactly been emotionally available lately." Emotionally available. I nearly laughed, but it came out as a breath instead. "She left," I said quietly. "For 3 months, without warning. With lies. And she came back pregnant with another man's child." He blinked. His lips parted like he was about to say something. But nothing came. I leaned forward, eyes steady. "Son, if the roles were reversed, if I left for months, came back with a woman's baby in my belly, and expected your mother to just resume life like nothing happened, what would you tell her?" He didn't answer, just stared at the table like it held the answers he didn't want to give. But I saw it in his eyes. He didn't want it to be true. Not because he doubted me, but because he couldn't stomach the version of his mother that these facts revealed. He grew quiet after that, said he needed to think, left with the envelope tucked under his arm like it might explode. I stood at the window and watched him get into his car, start the engine, then just sit there, not moving, just holding the wheel and staring ahead. For a long time, he didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. And in the silence that followed, I remembered. I remembered how, as a boy, he used to believe his mother could fix anything. A scraped knee, a broken toy, even a thunderstorm. She was his fortress, and me, I was the shadow behind the scenes, the provider, the quiet one. I never minded that role. I never needed to be the favorite, just the reliable one. But when the storm came, when I needed him to see me not as the quiet one, but as the wronged one, he couldn't do it. Not right away. And that hurt in a way I wasn't ready for. Because betrayal from a spouse breaks your heart, but disbelief from your own child, that pierces your soul. A week passed before he called again. "Dad," he said softly, "can I come over?" I told him yes. He brought Chinese takeout, like we used to on Friday nights when he was a kid. He didn't say much as we ate, barely touched his food. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the printed email. It was creased now, worn. I reread it a dozen times, he said, and I kept trying to find a way to make it mean something else. But I couldn't. His voice broke. "I'm sorry." I looked at him, really looked at him. My son, the boy I raised to be good, loyal, fair. He wasn't blind, just human, just hurt. "I know," I said. "You don't have to apologize for hoping she was better than this." He looked up at me with wet eyes. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. Instead I stood, walked over to the side drawer, and took out the folder where I had gathered every receipt, every screenshot, every call log. "I'm not going to fight her," I said. "I'm going to outthink her." My son stayed quiet for a while. After I said that, "Outthink her." It wasn't a phrase he was used to hearing from me. But betrayal changes things. It sharpens your instincts, forces you to wake up in rooms you once moved through half asleep. He helped me wash the dishes that night. We didn't speak much, but I noticed how he looked around the house differently now. The wedding photos, the framed memories, the little notes she used to leave on the fridge, some still stuck there like ghosts. He was starting to see what I saw, and what I saw was a trap. Our home was modest, but it was ours. We had bought it together 30 years ago, back when interest rates were decent and dreams still felt real. I'd made every mortgage payment on time, paid off the final installment just 5 years ago. But I had made one mistake, one that felt harmless at the time. I had put her name on the deed, not out of obligation, out of love. And that love had just become my greatest liability. I called my lawyer the next morning. His name's Carl. We'd gone to high school together, hadn't spoken in years. He answered on the first ring. "Long time, old man. What's going on?" I told him everything. No flourishes, just the facts. The disappearance, the pregnancy, the email, the return. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I was done, there was a long pause. Then he said something that made my heart drop a little deeper. "She can go after half the house," he said. "She'll claim abandonment, emotional neglect. She'll have sympathy because she's carrying a child, even if it's not yours." I stayed silent. Carl continued. "If she's smart and she's got a lawyer, she won't come at you directly. She'll try to spin a story. Say she left because she felt unsafe, unloved. Say you were distant. Say you pushed her into someone else's arms. I gripped the phone tighter. And the worst part, he said. If you raise your voice, lose your temper, or make any sudden legal move, she'll use that as evidence. Right now, your best weapon is silence and preparation. So that's what I did. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask who the father was. I didn't say a word about lawyers or property or betrayal. I let her think I was stunned, confused, hurt, but passive. Because the truth is, I needed her to feel safe, long enough to miscalculate. In the meantime, Carl gave me a few marching orders. Start pulling your financials, he said. Secure anything you don't want disputed. If you have separate accounts, move your personal savings. Get your tax filings in order. Start a paper trail. I spent the next few days doing exactly that. Opened a new savings account in my name only. Transferred every paycheck. Closed the joint credit card and sent her a polite message about budgeting reasons. She didn't reply. I started looking through our documents, things I hadn't touched in years. That's when I found it. A contract from when we refinanced the house 7 years ago. Her signature was missing. Just mine. I stared at it like I had found a lifeline in a shipwreck. I called Carl again. Are you sure this document is valid? I asked. He looked at the scanned copy, then called back and said, this changes everything. Because even though her name was on the original deed, she never signed the refinance, which meant the final ownership paperwork was legally skewed in my favor. It's murky, he said. But with the right presentation and her absence during that filing, it's going to look like abandonment. He paused. Play this right, and she won't walk away with half the house. She'll walk away with nothing. Still, we weren't safe yet. Carl warned me, she might try to emotionally manipulate me back into a corner. Might cry, might beg, might bring up memories. Or worse, she might play the mother card. And she did. That same week, she started cooking again. Set the table for two, laughed louder on the phone when I was nearby. Left little notes like old times. She even came into my room one evening, laid a hand on my shoulder and said, we can get past this, can't we? I wasn't thinking straight. Everything was a blur. You're still my husband. I looked up at her. I wanted to scream, but I said nothing. I just nodded slowly, then turned away. Because the storm wasn't ready yet, and neither was she. The next day I woke up to the sound of voices in the kitchen. Laughter, her sister's voice, bright, piercing, like a bell you don't want to hear before coffee. I walked in quietly and stood by the doorway. They didn't notice me at first. Then her sister looked up and smiled like we were old friends. Well, look who's up. The man of the hour. She poured herself another cup of coffee and added, we were just talking about how strong your wife is, carrying life and still trying to fix her marriage. Fix her marriage. She said that like my house hadn't been turned into a stage set for a drama I never auditioned for. Like the betrayal didn't exist. Like the pregnancy was a minor inconvenience, not a flagrant wound torn into my chest. My wife just looked down into her tea. Didn't speak, didn't even make eye contact. So I said nothing. I simply nodded, turned around and left the room. Later that evening, I got a call from her brother, David. He's always been the reasonable one. Quiet, level-headed, or so I thought. I heard there's tension, he began. Voice smooth like he'd rehearsed it. I know you're hurt, man. But don't throw away a lifetime over a few months. She's still your wife. I was silent, he continued. She didn't kill anyone. She just got confused. She was lonely. You've always been distant, haven't you? There it was again. That quiet narrative she had been building, seeding the idea that I had driven her into someone else's arms, that I'd become so cold, so detached, that her cheating wasn't betrayal. It was a symptom. I was faithful, I said calmly. I never stepped out, not once. 30 years. I gave her everything, and she gave someone else a child. He hesitated, then said something that stunned me. Well, you always put work first. Maybe that was your mistake. I hung up, not out of rage, out of clarity. 2 days later, her mother showed up. I heard the knock, opened the door, and there she was, arms wide, perfume strong enough to coat the entire porch. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. "Honey, listen," she said, placing a firm hand on my arm. I raised her. I know her heart, and I'm telling you now, she regrets everything. She sat me down like I was a child in trouble. "She needs support," she said. "Not punishment. Not silence. And if you keep this up, you're going to ruin everything you two built." I looked her dead in the eye. She already did. She blinked, stunned for a second. Then came the final blow. "She told me you were never emotionally available, that you treated her like furniture, present, but cold." I stood up, not in anger, in finality. "You came into my house to repeat her lies to my face. I think we're done here." She left with a huff, muttering about pride and forgiveness. But her visit sealed something in me. This wasn't about hurt anymore. This was about how many people were willing to excuse a betrayal just to keep their version of a story alive. They weren't here for me. They weren't here to listen. They were here to convince me to fold, to absorb the damage like I always had. But I wasn't that man anymore. I realized something that night, sitting alone with a cup of untouched coffee. Some people only love you when you're useful, when you're the provider. The rock, the predictable one who forgives, forgets, and carries on. But once you need them to stand for you, once you're the one bleeding, they vanish, or worse, they blame you for the cut. She noticed the shift before she understood it. I stopped asking questions, stopped sitting in the same room for too long, stopped showing signs of injury she could measure or use, and that scared her more than anger ever could. She started trying again, dinners, compliments, small gestures that once would have felt sweet, but now rang hollow. One evening she brought home a new set of baby clothes, soft yellow unisex. She placed them gently on the table and looked up at me, waiting for a reaction. I gave none. "Don't you want to talk about what this means for us?" she asked. I folded my napkin slowly. "There is no us," I said. She blinked, and for the first time her smile faltered. Not because of cruelty in my voice, but because there wasn't any. I wasn't cruel. I was done. She began testing me then. Little things, pushing boundaries to see if I'd react. She left receipts for prenatal visits on the kitchen counter, booked a pregnancy photo shoot, and framed one of the ultrasound images on the mantel. She was building a narrative, one where I was the cold husband who rejected her, and the innocent child. But I knew what she was doing. She was preparing for the courtroom, trying to provoke, trying to create a record of my neglect. So I stayed quiet, but not still. Behind the scenes, I moved faster. Carl helped me freeze every joint account. We closed the second credit card she'd opened without telling me. I had the house utilities shifted into my name. One by one, filed a quiet claim of financial misconduct based on her hotel stays, online payments to unknown names, and unapproved transfers. She didn't know yet, but I had already hired a forensic accountant. Every dollar she spent during her time away was being traced, itemized. And every piece of that trail led back to one thing: intent. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a plan. I heard her crying in the bathroom one night. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was another scene for her imaginary jury. I didn't walk in. I didn't ask if she was okay. Because I had given her that space once, 3 months ago, and she had filled it with betrayal. Our son came by again that week. He pulled me aside in the garage, hands stuffed in his pockets. "She told me you've frozen everything," he said, trying to keep his voice level. I nodded. "She says she has nowhere to go if this gets ugly." "She should have thought about that," I replied. He looked torn. "She made a mistake, Dad." I met his eyes. "She made a child. That night she knocked on my door. I think we should talk." I didn't look up from my book. "We've said everything already," I replied. She lingered. Then came the question she had been waiting to ask for weeks. "Do you want me to leave?" I turned the page before answering. "Not yet." And I saw it in her face. Confusion. Because she thought she'd won by staying. She didn't realize she was exactly where I needed her to be. The house was the stage, and she was still acting. But the audience had changed. No longer my son. No longer her family. No longer even me. It was the law. It was the court. It was truth. Quiet, deliberate, undeniable truth. A week later, she tried to offer a settlement. I came home to find her at the dining table with a folder, papers spread out like peace offerings. "I know things got messy," she began, "but I think we can both walk away with something fair, civil." She named a figure. Not small, but not subtle either. Enough to let her walk away with the house, or at least part of it. Enough to suggest she still believed she had leverage. I sat down, took the folder, looked at the number. Then I smiled, folded the paper neatly, and slid it back to her. "You're not after money," I said quietly. "You're after narrative. You want to rewrite this whole thing, make yourself the victim." She stiffened. "But you forgot," I continued. "I don't need to scream to be heard. I just need to wait long enough for the truth to walk into the room with its own voice." She left the table. Didn't say a word. And this time, she didn't try to pretend I was wrong. The silent war continued. But now she was the one retreating. Every move she made I had already mapped. Every lie she thought she could twist. I had proof untangling it. I wasn't fighting. I was outlasting. And every day she stayed in that house thinking she had a chance, she was losing ground. Because I had stopped being her husband. I had become her consequence. 2 days later, she left early in the morning. Said she was going to the pharmacy. But I watched from the upstairs window as a car pulled up and she got in, laughing, talking fast. It wasn't an Uber. It was the same dark blue sedan I'd seen once before, parked down the street with a driver who never got out. I took a photo this time. License plate. Timestamp. She was growing careless. Or maybe she believed I was still in shock, still spiraling. But I wasn't. I was orchestrating. That afternoon, I put on a fresh shirt, shaved, and drove across town to a small cafe near the industrial district. It was quiet, half empty. She wasn't expecting to see me. But I wasn't meeting her. I was meeting him. The man she'd thrown her life toward like a drowning woman, mistaking an anchor for a life vest. Marcus. He looked younger in person. Mid-30s maybe. Smooth skin, but eyes that twitched too much. He wore flashy shoes and a watch too big for his wrist. The kind of man who mistakes image for character. He didn't recognize me when I walked in. I sat down across from him without invitation. He looked up, confused. "I don't think you do," I said. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside was the DNA report I had requested weeks ago, through a friend of Carl's discreetly. Marcus was the father. No contest. "I thought you'd want a copy," I said calmly. He went pale. "This is your her soon-to-be ex-husband," I answered. "And unlike her, I believe in transparency." He shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, I didn't know." I raised a hand. "I'm not here to fight you. You can have her, but you need to understand something." I leaned in. "She's not coming into my home. raising your child under my roof, while you stand in the shadows playing innocent. You're responsible now for everything." He opened his mouth again, but I was already standing. "Next time you pick her up," I added over my shoulder, "make sure she brings her things. I'll be changing the locks." I didn't wait for him to respond. I walked out into the sunlight, feeling nothing close to joy, but everything close to clarity. When I returned home, she was back. She didn't notice the locksmith van pulling away, didn't see the boxes I'd already packed, carefully, respectfully, of everything that belonged to her. Clothes, trinkets, baby items, all in the front guest room, by the door. That evening, I made dinner for myself, sat in silence. No music, no news. She came down and hovered near the kitchen door. "I ran into someone today," she said. I didn't look up. "I know." She stepped closer. "He told me you gave him some paperwork." I took another bite, chewed, swallowed. "You're pregnant. He's the father. He deserves to know." She stared at me, eyes wide. "You're trying to destroy me," she whispered. I set my fork down. "No," I said. "You already did that. I'm just moving the wreckage out of my house." That night, I emailed Carl. All assets moved. All accounts locked. DNA results filed. Photo evidence time-stamped. Bank irregularities traced. I was ready. He replied within the hour. "Let's end this quietly and completely. She won't know what hit her." The next morning, I asked her to join me in the living room. I handed her the new envelope. Inside, a formal request for mediation, a division of assets leaning fully in my favor but not without dignity. And the final condition: she vacate the house within 10 days. She read every line. Her hands trembled. Then she looked up and asked, "Where am I supposed to go?" I didn't flinch. "That's between you and Marcus now." She stood there, stunned, mouth open, but no sound. Then I gave her the final cut. Not with cruelty, but with truth. "Are you ready to be the one washing his mother's socks?" Her eyes snapped up. "What?" I stayed seated, steady as stone. "You wanted a new life, a new family. You romanticized your escape, but now you're living in the exit. It doesn't come with flowers. It comes with bills, diapers, and broken trust. I gave you a kingdom. You chose chaos. Now it's yours." She didn't speak. She just walked upstairs and closed the door. It was the first time I ever saw her defeated without drama. No slamming, no shouting. Just silence. The same silence she once used to control me, now turning on her like a mirror. The next day, she was gone. Boxes missing. Ultrasound photo off the mantel. The faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the hallway, but fading. I changed the locks anyway. Not out of fear, out of closure. A week passed. 7 days of silence. No texts, no calls. Not from her. Not from Marcus. Not even from her family, who had suddenly gone quiet, like the weight of truth had finally settled where noise used to be. I thought that was the end. But endings don't come clean. They knock when you're halfway between healing and hardness. It was a Thursday evening. Rain had just started to tap at the windows. I was fixing the curtain rod in the guest room when the doorbell rang. She stood on the porch in a beige coat, damp hair clinging to her cheeks, eyes rimmed with red. Not mascara, just weariness. I didn't invite her in. She didn't ask. "I need to talk," she said. I folded my arms, leaned against the doorframe. She glanced behind me, toward the house she once called hers. The place where every memory now burned cold. "I'm not here to fight," she whispered. "I just need you to hear me out." I didn't speak. She took it as permission. "I didn't plan it like this," she started. "I didn't go looking for someone. It just happened. I felt invisible. You were always working, Always somewhere else, even when you were home. There it was again. The script, the soft blame, the gentle deflection. I begged for attention, she continued. And when I didn't get it, I drifted. I looked her in the eyes, calm, still. You didn't drift, I said. You jumped. Her face tightened. She wasn't used to this version of me. The one who didn't raise his voice, didn't plead, didn't soften the blow. She tried again. I was scared. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know who to tell. I kept thinking, maybe we could fix this. I handed her a folder. Inside, the official DNA results, her financial transactions tied to Marcus's address, the email draft she thought she deleted, security footage of her leaving with him 3 days before she went to visit her sick mom, a transcript of the call she made to her sister, saying, "I'm free now. I'll just say I'm going to mom's." She stared at the folder like it might burn her. And still she said, "You went through my things." Finally I laughed. Quiet, bitter, controlled. "No," I said. "I went through the truth." She folded the folder shut and looked up at me. Tears now real but meaningless. "I didn't think you'd fight back." That's when I looked at her with all the weight I'd been carrying for months. "I didn't fight," I said. "I prepared." She stepped closer, rain dripping from the edge of her coat. "I lost everything." I nodded. "So did I. The difference is I didn't lie about it." She started to shake. Whether from the cold or the consequences, I don't know. She took a breath like she wanted to say something final, something profound, but nothing came, so I said it for her. "You thought my silence meant surrender, but it was set up. Every day I didn't argue. Every time I didn't beg, I was watching, learning, choosing. You mistook my stillness for weakness." I paused, eyes steady. "It wasn't. It was power." She stepped back, swallowed hard, and for the first time nodded. There would be no redemption arc, no final embrace, no last-minute rewrite of her story. Only a mirror, and everything she'd done, staring back. The next morning, Carl filed the final documents. No courtroom dramatics, no televised spectacle. Every page signed, sealed, and sent. She didn't contest. Not anymore. Not after the folder. Not after the quiet showdown that stripped away the last of her illusion of control. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not my son. Not the neighbors. Not even the few friends who had whispered concern during the long, quiet war. Because when a man loses everything he trusted and still stands tall, he doesn't need applause. He just needs peace. The divorce finalized in less than 6 weeks. It shocked Carl. He thought she'd put up more of a fight. But she didn't. Because she knew what I knew. She had already lost. She moved in with Marcus, as expected. At first there were pictures online, smiling maternity shots, baby shower balloons, hashtags about fresh starts. But then the posts stopped. Not abruptly, just faded, like a candle running out of wax. I didn't check often, but when I did, I noticed the signs. Her eyes weren't lit anymore. The captions got shorter. The glow gave way to something that looked more like routine than romance. I didn't need to spy to know what happened. Reality had set in. He wasn't a fantasy anymore. He was the man who left dirty dishes in the sink. The man who forgot to warm up the bottle at 2 a.m. The man who asked why the baby wouldn't stop crying. She had gotten everything she wanted, and realized she'd left everything she needed behind. I never said "I told you so." Never called. Never gloated. Instead, I built something for myself quietly. I rented a small place outside of town. Nothing big. 1 bedroom, a sun-drenched living room, and a little garden out back that I tended to every morning before the world woke up. I took a job at a used bookstore. Slow work, quiet customers. The kind of place where you could hear your own thoughts and still want to listen. I began to write again, something I hadn't done in 30 years. Not about her, not about the betrayal, but about life. About starting over at an age where people assume your story is already written. One evening, I was stacking books when a woman in her 60s walked in, gray streak in her hair, smile like sunlight after a storm. She didn't ask personal questions. She just asked where the poetry section was. And I showed her, then went back to shelving. She stayed for an hour, bought 2 books, said thank you, like she meant it. It was the first human moment I'd had in months that didn't feel soaked in pain. I wrote her name down on a sticky note afterward, not because I was in love, but because it reminded me life doesn't stop with betrayal. It begins with truth. One day, I got a message from my son. Just 4 words, "You were right, Dad." He didn't say what about. He didn't need to. We met for lunch the next weekend. He hugged me longer than usual. "I watched her," he said. "She's not happy. It wasn't what she thought it'd be." I nodded. "She traded a home for a fantasy, and now she has a child with a man who's already looking for the exit." He looked down at his plate. "You really forgave her?" I looked him in the eye. "No," I said softly, "but I outgrew the need for her to suffer. Revenge is loud, but healing is quiet. It's the peace that doesn't require proof, the victory that needs no parade." I didn't burn bridges. I simply crossed to the other side and built a better life there. Months passed. Life settled into something still, something soft. I didn't think about her as often, not because I was trying to forget, but because I no longer needed to remember. The storm had passed, and all that was left was clean air. One Sunday afternoon, my son came over. He brought his daughter with him. My granddaughter. She had my eyes. Her laughter filled the house like music I hadn't realized was missing. We sat on the porch, the 3 of us, her drawing chalk shapes on the pavement, him sipping tea, me watching the sun slide down behind the trees. He waited until she went inside to speak. "I never told you," he began slowly, "how hard it was for me to see the truth." I said nothing. "Let him talk. She was my mom," he continued. "I looked at her like she was untouchable. And when you started showing me what she did, a part of me didn't want to believe it. Because if she could lie like that, then everything I thought was stable wasn't." I nodded. "I know." He leaned forward. "But I saw how you handled it. No drama, no shouting, no destruction. Just quiet strength. You showed me that dignity isn't loud. It's deliberate." There was a long pause. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." He looked out at the trees, then back at me. "What would you have done differently if this had happened when you were younger?" I smiled. A little sad, a little wise. I probably would have begged, shouted, tried to fix something that wasn't broken. It was just poisoned. He took that in. "I'm glad you didn't," he said, "because I needed to see that a man can be hurt and still walk away with his head high." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded note. "I found this," he said, "in Mom's old things when she moved out." I opened it. It was a list. A handwritten list. Things I think he'll never notice. Changed the joint password to hide messages. Moved $600 into my private account. Told Marcus I'd be free in 3 weeks. Booked the hotel under his old name. I read every line, carefully, not with rage, but with reverence. Because the truth doesn't always arrive when you want it to, but it always arrives. I folded the paper gently and handed it back. He didn't take it. "Keep it," he said, "so you'll never question your strength." We went back inside. My granddaughter had fallen asleep with chalk dust on her fingers, her head resting on a cushion by the sliding door. He picked her up gently, cradled her. Before he left, He turned back. "Dad," he said. I looked up. "If this ever happens to me, what should I do?" I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, looked him straight in the eye. "Don't beg," I said. "Don't fold, think. Then strike once, cleanly, and never look back." He nodded, held my gaze for a moment longer, then left. I stood at the door long after they were gone, watching the night settle in, watching the last gold of day slip beneath the hills. And in that moment, I realized something simple and quiet. Pain doesn't leave you. It just teaches you how to walk without limping. The house is quieter now, but it's full of peace. And every so often when I sit in the garden, I hear birdsong and think, this is what survival sounds like. Not screaming, not vengeance, not noise, just a man who was supposed to break and chose instead to rebuild. If this story hit you in the chest the way it did me, share it. Comment below, what would you have done? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of men who walked away, not broken, but whole.